Jacob Hale heard it before he saw it, one ragged, furious roar that ripped the air apart. 10 steps ahead, a lioness burst from the grass. Skin stretched over bones, her left flank torn open and bleeding. She staggered, ribs heaving, eyes locked on him with a strange mix of defiance and desperation. Jacob froze. Out here, a starving lioness could still kill, but something else was wrong. Then the smell hit him, smoke, thick and acrid, carried on a hot gust. He turned his head and saw it, a wall of orange flames, swelling higher, feeding on the dry savanna grass like it was paper. The lioness stumbled again, her paws sliding in the dust, and collapsed in front of him. A cloud of ash lifted into the air around her. Jacob's instincts screamed at him to back away, but his gut anchored his feet. This wasn't just an encounter with wildlife, it was a countdown. He dropped his pack and unzipped it, fumbling for his canteen. His shirt clung to his back, drenched in sweat, the heat already biting through the air. The fire wasn't distant. The snapping of wood and the dull, hungry roar of the flames told him it was closing in. He crouched low, pouring water into the canteen cap and sliding it toward her. Her eyes followed it, nostrils flaring at the scent. For a moment he thought she'd ignore it, but then her dry tongue flicked out, tasting the cool drops. Relief flashed through him, but it lasted less than a second. The fire line was already less than 50 yards away, advancing with a wind that carried glowing embers. He glanced back behind them, was a tangle of thorn bushes and uneven terrain. Carrying her would be slow, dangerous, maybe impossible. A burst of wind shoved the heat against his face, and sparks hissed as they landed in the dry grass around them. Jacob ripped open another pouch from his pack, tossing a strip of dried meat in front of her. She sniffed, weakly dragging herself forward to take it, chewing in slow, deliberate motions. It was the first sign of life he'd seen in her. But the flames crackled louder, licking higher into the smoke-filled sky. His mind screamed for a plan. There wasn't time to think, only to act. Jacob inched closer, speaking softly. "Come on, girl. You have to move." She didn't growl. She didn't bare her teeth. Instead, her ears tilted slightly back, and she blinked at him in a slow, heavy motion. That was enough. Jacob slid his arms under her chest and hindquarters. She was shockingly light, bones sharp beneath her fur, and the moment he lifted, she let out a guttural moan of pain that tightened his throat. Staggering under her weight, Jacob took a step back, then another. The heat stabbed into his lungs, the air tasting like burnt metal. A burning branch snapped from a nearby tree, hitting the ground hard enough to explode into glowing fragments that landed dangerously close. He kicked them away with his boot, each movement costing precious seconds. His legs screamed from the weight, but stopping wasn't an option. The fire's rhythm changed. A sudden blast of wind turned its advance into a sprint, flames leaping forward like predators lunging at prey. Jacob's heart slammed in his chest as he fought through the first wall of thorny brush, the branches clawing at his arms and face. He kept moving, shielding the lioness as much as he could from the sharp cuts. Her head rested limply against his arm, breath shallow, but her eyes still fixed on him, as if reading his every move. Behind them, the fire roared louder, devouring the space they'd just crossed. Ahead, Jacob saw a narrow path curving toward a cluster of large rocks, maybe shelter, maybe a dead end. He didn't know which, but his grip tightened around the lioness. Whatever waited there had to be better than the fire chasing them. He lowered his head, braced his legs, and pushed forward into the unknown, the orange glow on his back growing brighter with every step. Jacob's boots slammed against the cracked ground as he half stumbled toward the rocks. The lioness's weight pulled his shoulders forward, every step threatening to drop them both. Behind him, the fire's roar was now a living thing, snapping and hissing as it chased them. The heat on his back felt like an open oven door, and every breath scraped his throat raw. He could see the path narrowing ahead, choked with tangled roots and scattered stones. He shifted his grip, gritting his teeth as the lioness's claws brushed his arm, reflexive, weak, but still sharp. She gave a low rumble, not aggression, just exhaustion. A gust of wind pushed more smoke into his face, burning his eyes and forcing him to blink rapidly. His lungs begged him to stop. He didn't. Every second mattered, and stopping meant becoming part of the ash that already covered the ground behind them. The path twisted suddenly, forcing him to duck under a fallen branch slick with soot. As he cleared it, the sight ahead froze him, two large boulders forming a narrow gap. just wide enough for him to squeeze through without the lioness touching the jagged edges. It was a perfect choke point, but on the other side, the ground dropped away steeply into a dry riverbed. Jacob's stomach clenched. Going down meant losing control. Staying here meant fire. A burst of embers rained down, some landing on the lioness's fur. Jacob slapped them away with his free hand, feeling the sting on his palm. She flinched but didn't struggle. The flame's glow painted the rocks around them in shifting shades of red and gold, like they were trapped inside a furnace. He didn't have time to weigh options. He had to move, and he had to move now. Tightening his hold, Jacob squeezed through the rock gap, his pack scraping hard against the stone. The lioness's body shifted in his arms, almost slipping free, and he had to jam his knee into the dirt to keep his balance. He could hear the fire crawling up the path behind him, feeding on every scrap of dry grass. The heat in the gap was suffocating, turning the narrow space into a tunnel of scorching air. Then gravity betrayed him. The slope on the other side was steeper than it looked. His boots slid, sending him and the lioness into an awkward, jarring descent. Loose dirt and pebbles tumbled with them, and he fought to keep his grip. A sharp rock tore into his leg through his pants, pain flaring white-hot, but he kept his body between her and the ground. They slid until they hit the hard bottom of the dry riverbed, the impact rattling his teeth. For a moment, he just lay there, chest heaving, sweat dripping into his eyes. The lioness stirred weakly, her breath quick but steady. Above them, the fire reached the edge of the cliff, its glow turning the smoke into a swirling orange storm. Embers fell like burning snow, some vanishing before hitting the ground, others smoldering where they landed. He had bought them seconds, maybe a minute, not more. Jacob pushed himself up, legs trembling. The riverbed stretched in both directions, one side twisting deeper into the unknown, the other blocked by a wall of tangled, dead branches. He knew the fire would eventually find a way down here. If they didn't move again, they'd be trapped in a canyon of flames. Adjusting the lioness in his arms, he picked the open path and started walking, each step crunching over brittle river stones. The glow above followed like a predator that couldn't be shaken. Jacob's boots slid and scraped on the loose stones as he pushed deeper into the dry riverbed, every step jolting up through his legs. The lioness's weight pulled heavily against his arms, her breath faint but steady against his chest. The air was thicker here, the walls of the riverbed trapping the smoke until each inhale felt like swallowing grit. Sweat ran into his eyes, blurring his vision. Then he heard a deeper, more violent crackle, carried on a gust from behind. His stomach dropped. That wasn't just the background roar of the blaze, it was the sound of flames pouring into the riverbed itself. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw it. A wall of fire spilling down the far end, tumbling forward like liquid orange, feeding on the brittle grass that had taken root between the stones. In seconds, it would be on them. The narrow canyon that had been their refuge now turned into a perfect trap, funneling the heat straight at them. Jacob's heartbeat pounded in his ears, his mind running through options, none of them good. Running forward would be slow. Carrying her over the uneven stones was a gamble. Dropping her wasn't an option. Scanning the walls desperately, his eyes caught a break in the rock to the left, a jagged, eroded slope that might lead to higher ground. It wasn't much, but it was the only way out. Jacob shifted the lioness in his arms, feeling her claws twitch weakly against his forearm. Her head lolled, but her eyes were half open, fixed on him. He adjusted his grip, bracing his legs before lunging toward the slope. Each step over the river stones sent sharp jolts of pain up his shins. The base of the incline loomed in front of him, steeper than he'd hoped, and covered in loose gravel. One bad step and they'd tumble backward into the advancing flames. The wind shifted again, shoving a wave of hot air against his back and carrying with it flecks of burning debris. An ember landed on the lioness's side, and Jacob swatted it away with his free hand, ignoring the sting in his palm. He put one boot on the slope and tested it. It shifted under his weight like sand. This was going to be a fight. He started the climb, leaning forward to keep balance, his thighs already screaming in protest. Each upward step came with the grinding sound of gravel sliding underfoot. Halfway up, his right boot slipped, dropping him to one knee. The lioness's body shifted dangerously in his arms, almost sliding free. Jacob's pulse spiked with panic. She stirred just enough to lift her head, eyes locking with his. What he saw there wasn't fear, it was something heavier, older. Trust. That look alone was enough to make him plant his foot and push up again. The heat pressed harder now, the kind that seared even through his sweat-soaked shirt. A burning branch rolled against the base of the slope, glowing like a coal. Jacob didn't dare look back again. He knew the fire was close enough that the next gust could send it racing up toward them. His breathing turned into sharp, desperate gasps, the metallic taste of adrenaline thick on his tongue. He was almost there, the edge just a few steps above. With one final heave, Jacob swung his leg over the top of the slope, collapsing forward onto the flat ground. The lioness slid against him, her sides heaving, the smell of singed fur sharp in his nose. Below them, the fire roared into the space they'd just escaped, flames licking up the lower part of the incline. For a few seconds, all he could do was lie there, gasping, his arms trembling from the strain. When he finally sat up, the reality hit. There was no time to rest. The grass ahead was unburned, but the wind was cruel, scattering embers far from the main blaze. Small fires sparked to life ahead of them, each one a possible wall they'd have to break through. Behind them, the main fire consumed the riverbed, its glow turning the smoke above into a molten sky. Jacob looked down at the lioness. She blinked slowly, her breath shallow but steady. He tightened his grip around her again. The fire wasn't done chasing them, and the open savanna ahead might be even worse. Jacob pushed forward across the unburned grass, every muscle in his arms screaming from the lioness's weight. The air ahead shimmered with heat, even though the flames weren't visible yet. He knew what that meant. Embers had landed here before him, starting smaller fires out of sight. The ground was uneven, dotted with animal burrows that could snap his ankle if he stepped wrong. Behind him, the roar of the main blaze had dulled into a deep, steady thunder, but he could still feel its pull, like a predator closing in. Then, up ahead, a flicker of orange cut through the haze, two separate fires burning toward each other, forming a narrowing V-shape in the grass. His chest tightened. If those flames met, the only way out would be gone. Jacob's mind raced, scanning the horizon. There a cluster of large, weather-worn rocks jutting out of the earth, maybe 20 yards to the right. They could provide some shelter from the heat, maybe even block the wind enough to slow the spread. He angled his steps toward them, quickening his pace despite the strain in his arms. As he approached, the wind shifted violently, dragging a curtain of smoke across his path. His eyes burned, vision blurring until the rocks seemed to sway like mirages. A branch ignited just ahead, the fire racing through the dry grass toward his legs. Jacob kicked through it, the spark stinging his shins. The lioness flinched weakly in his arms, her claws digging in for the first time, not in fear, but in reflex. He spoke low, steady, not even sure if she understood. Almost there. Just hold on. The rocks rose taller as he neared, their surface pitted and rough, casting a narrow strip of shade against the scorched ground. Jacob rounded the largest one and saw a gap between two boulders barely wider than his shoulders, leading into a shallow pocket carved out by years of wind and rain. It wasn't much, but it was a place where the flames couldn't easily reach. He ducked inside, lowering the lioness onto the cool dirt. Her sides rose and fell, her ears twitching at the distant roar outside. He leaned against the rock wall, sucking in ragged breaths, every nerve on edge. Through the gap, he could see the fire closing in, the twin walls of flame racing toward each other. The heat swelled in waves, but the air inside the rock pocket stayed just bearable. Sparks danced in the smoke above, some dying mid-air, others snapping against the stones with tiny pops. Jacob's heart hammered, not because they weren't safe yet, but because this might be the last place they could stand their ground. Minutes stretched like hours as the fire surrounded their refuge. The lioness shifted, her head lifting just enough to meet his gaze. In that moment, Jacob noticed something different. Her eyes, once glassy and distant, now tracked him clearly. She gave a slow blink, then laid her head against his boot. He froze, the gesture striking him harder than the fire's heat. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was trust, deliberate and fragile. The worst of the blaze passed in a thunder of crackling wood and rushing wind, leaving behind a wasteland of smoldering black. Jacob waited until the heat eased before stepping out, scanning the horizon. The sky was a patchwork of smoke and fading orange light. The lioness tried to rise but faltered. Without hesitation, he bent down, slid his arms under her again, and lifted. Her weight felt no lighter, but somehow carrying her now didn't feel as heavy. They moved across the charred ground, the air thick with the scent of ash and damp earth. Somewhere ahead, there had to be water, safety, something better than the fire and the emptiness it left behind. As they disappeared into the smoky distance, the last thing Jacob felt was the faint pressure of the lioness's paw resting against his arm, steady and unafraid, as if to say she understood he was the reason she was still alive.